At the heart of a crowded farmer's market, the afternoon sun baked down, turning the air thick with heat and tension. Agent Sophia Taylor, an undercover FBI agent, was simply trying to grab some fresh produce, her mind occupied with the mundane task of haggling over peaches. It was supposed to be a routine break, a chance to clear her head after a long week of covert work tracking a dangerous drug ring. But it all turned chaotic in an instant. Officer Blake Harris, a towering figure with a chip on his shoulder, approached her with accusation in his eyes. His voice was sharp and cutting as he claimed she had stolen from one of the vendors. Sophia tried to explain, but Harris wasn't listening. His mind already made up. The words flew fast. "Thief!" he yelled. The crowd grew uneasy, some people stepping back, others watching with their phones raised to record the drama unfolding. Before Sophia could fully react, Harris's fist crashed into her face, sending her stumbling to the ground. A split lip. Blood started to trickle down and the world seemed to slow. The market-goers gasped, the tension hanging heavy in the air. Sophia, blood staining her lips, slowly pushed herself to her feet, anger burning in her chest. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, eyes flashing with fury. "You'll regret that," she muttered under her breath, her voice cold, controlled. Then, with an almost surgical precision, she pulled out her FBI badge, holding it up so the fading sunlight caught its gold surface. "I'm federal, you idiot." The crowd stirred. Some gasped, some murmured. But Harris? He just sneered. "Nice try," he mocked, his disbelief thick in his southern drawl. "I think I'm buying that some cheap knockoff doesn't make you legit." Sophia's heart raced, her body aching, but she didn't flinch. Harris had just made his biggest mistake, and Sophia wasn't about to let it slide. Sophia's heart was racing, but she forced herself to keep her breath steady as the cold metal of the police precinct doors slammed shut behind her. She had seen this side of the law before. This was the part where the system turned its back on you, the part where the people you thought you could trust twisted the truth until it fit their narrative. But this was different. She had a secret, and the secret was her FBI badge that as the officers led her down the sterile hallways of the precinct. Whispers followed her every step, and she could feel the weight of their eyes. They were all looking at her as if she were nothing but an enemy, a criminal. The mocking glances didn't stop, and neither did the taunts. One officer, a heavy-set man with a permanent scowl, stepped in front of her. "FBI, huh?" he sneered, his eyes scanning her torn jacket, her bruised lip. "Is this the part where we're supposed to believe you're innocent? Yeah, sure, you're FBI. And I'm the mayor of this city." Sophia didn't flinch. She knew what they were trying to do. They were trying to break her, trying to get her to crack, to let the truth slip out in a moment of weakness. But she wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. "I'm not guilty," she said, her voice steady, cutting through the jeering officers like a knife. "I'm FBI." She held up her badge, the gold glinting in the fluorescent light. She had been through a lot, but she knew she had to remain composed. Her cover was the only thing standing between her and total defeat. The officer just laughed, clearly unmoved by her words. "FBI, huh? That badge doesn't mean a damn thing here," he said. He turned toward the other officers who were standing nearby, all of them grinning, their smug expressions making her skin crawl. Anyone else here believe her? Didn't think so. Sophia's stomach churned, but she didn't let it show. She could feel the anger bubbling up, threatening to boil over, but she held it back. She couldn't let them see how much their cruelty affected her. Not now. Not when her life, her freedom, was hanging by a thread. They shoved her into a holding cell, the cold, dimly lit space smelling of sweat and stale air. The door clanged shut with an echo that made her stomach tighten. She was alone, trapped in this small cage with nothing but her thoughts and the sound of her own breathing. She sank down onto the bench, her mind racing. She had no idea what would happen next. The way they were treating her, it felt like the system had already decided her fate. Harris's influence was far-reaching, and the truth didn't matter. Not to these officers. Not here. She couldn't help but wonder how deep the corruption went. How many more would turn a blind eye just because Harris had a badge and power? The thought made her sick to her stomach. "This isn't over," she muttered under her breath. The words were for herself, a reminder that she couldn't give up. She had to stay focused. There was more at stake than just her career. Her family, her integrity, and the truth were all on the line. She couldn't let Harris win as the minutes turned into hours. The voices outside the cell continued to taunt her, to mock her, but she blocked it all out. She knew that any crack in her armor could be used against her. She had to be strong. She couldn't back down. Then the door to her cell swung open again, and Harris walked in. He stood there, his presence looming over her, his expression smug and calculating. "You think you're going to walk out of here, huh? You think the FBI's going to save you? Newsflash, sweetheart. You're not in control anymore." Sophia didn't rise to his bait. She remained seated, her gaze steady. She knew what he was trying to do. He wanted to break her, to make her fear him. But that wasn't going to happen. Not today. "You're the one who's going to regret this," Sophia said, her voice low but firm, the fire in her eyes unrelenting. "You're the one who's been lying, manipulating, and destroying people's lives. And when the truth comes out, you'll be the one on the other side of these bars." Harris's grin faltered for a split second, but he quickly regained his composure. "We'll see about that," he sneered, before stepping back and slamming the door shut. Sophia let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. She was still in the fight, and she wasn't about to lose. No matter what they did to her, she wasn't going to back down. Harris had made a mistake if he thought he had her cornered. The truth would come out. It had to. And when it did, Harris would pay. Sophia stepped out of the precinct, her chest tight with a mix of exhaustion and frustration. The world outside felt unreal, as though she had just awoken from a nightmare, only to find herself still trapped inside it. The air was thick with humidity, a summer storm threatening to break, but nothing could prepare her for what she was about to face. Her car hummed beneath her as she drove through the city, the familiar streets feeling like foreign terrain now. She had hoped that maybe, just maybe, the worst was over, but deep down she knew better. Officer Harris had made it clear that this was only the beginning, and something told her he wasn't done with her yet. When she finally reached her apartment, a sinking feeling lodged in her stomach. The door was slightly ajar, the lock broken. Her pulse quickened. She had always kept her apartment secure, always. Yet, this time, she hesitated at the threshold, the creeping dread in her chest making it hard to move. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open. What she saw made her stomach churn. Her sanctuary, her place of solitude, was no more. The once neat and tidy space was now in shambles. Furniture overturned, personal items tossed across the floor, her things violated in ways she could never have imagined. But it wasn't just the mess that took her breath away. It was the words. Racial slurs and threats were scrawled across the walls, the black ink smearing with the rage that had gone into writing them. Go back to where you came from. You don't belong here. Each word stung like a slap across her face, a reminder of the world she was fighting against. Her hands trembled as she took in the damage, her mind struggling to process the viciousness behind it. But it wasn't just the defacing of her apartment that shook her to her core. It was the note, taped to the refrigerator with what appeared to be her own blood. The message was clear. This isn't done. Her breath hitched. She knew in that moment that Officer Harris had escalated the situation. This wasn't just about a corrupt cop trying to break her down. This was personal. Harris had made it his mission to ruin her life, and he wasn't done yet. Her fingers tightened around her phone as she pulled it from her pocket. The world around her felt like it was closing in. The weight of the situation crashed down on her like a tidal wave, but she forced herself to stay calm. There was no time for panic, no time for doubt. She had to act fast. The phone rang twice before Agent Michael Harris, her supervisor, answered. Sophia? His voice was gruff, tired, but always reliable. What's going on? We just got your report from the precinct. But it's him. She cut in, her voice shaking, but determined. It's Harris. He's behind it. My apartment's been trashed, and there's a note. He's escalating. He's sending a message. The line was silent for a moment, and Sophia could almost hear the gears turning in Michael's mind. He knew exactly who Harris was, knew what he was capable of. And for a split second, Sophia thought she heard a hint of guilt in his voice. Damn it, he muttered, the frustration in his voice unmistakable. We're pushing this up the chain, but you need to stay calm, Sophia. Stay low. We'll get a team to investigate. But right now, I need you to get to a safe place. Safe place? The thought of being in hiding while Harris had the run of the city made her blood boil. She was a federal agent. Damn it. And she wasn't about to cower in fear. No, she said, her voice firm despite the knot in her stomach. I'm not hiding. I'm taking this to him. I'll expose him. Listen to me. Michael warned, his tone sharper now. This isn't a game. He's not going to stop. We need to build a case. We need to make sure we have everything. You're in danger, Sophia. The words hit harder than any punch Harris had thrown. She knew he was right, but that didn't change the fact that she couldn't just sit back and let this happen. She slammed her fist down on the table, ignoring the pain in her knuckles as she steeled herself. I'm done being his target, she snapped. I'm going after him, and I'll make sure he pays for this. There was a long pause before Michael spoke again, his voice heavy with concern but tinged with admiration. All right, just be careful. We'll get you the backup you need, but you have to wait for us. This is bigger than you think. Sophia's grip tightened on the phone. She glanced at the note again. The threat burned into her memory. This isn't done. She knew it wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. And now it was personal. I'll wait for backup, she said, her voice cold and determined. But I'm not backing down. The line went silent again, but this time, Sophia didn't care. She had made up her mind. Harris had already taken so much from her. Now she was going to take back control, and she would make sure he paid the price for everything he had done. Sophia had never felt so alone. She'd spent days trying to piece together the wreckage of her life, tracking down leads, speaking to contacts, trying to untangle the web of lies that Harris had spun. But every step she took seemed to lead her into deeper, darker shadows. She thought she was getting closer to bringing him down, to finally turning the tables. But what she found instead shattered everything. It was late one evening when the news hit. She sat on the couch in her apartment, the flickering glow of the TV illuminating her face, when Detective Marcus James, a man she had trusted like a brother, appeared on screen. His face was stiff, his eyes cold, and he was speaking into the camera as if he were reading from a script. We've had enough of this rogue agent, Marcus said, his voice steady and rehearsed. Agent Sophia Taylor has been coercing me into making false claims about Officer Blake Harris. She's compromised her integrity and the integrity of the FBI. I'm afraid she's been manipulating the system for her own personal gain." Sophia's stomach dropped. The words hit her like a sucker punch, each syllable tearing through her sense of reality. Marcus, her friend, her ally in this battle against corruption, was turning on her? She stood frozen, unable to look away from the screen, as Marcus continued to speak, his expression never changing. "I have already informed internal affairs about her actions. She's a threat to this department, and I believe she should be held accountable for her crimes." Her mind raced as her heart hammered in her chest. Betrayal. It stung, deeper than any punch Harris had thrown. Marcus, the one person she had counted on in this fight, had just sold her out in front of the world. But that wasn't the worst of it. Sophia's instincts screamed at her. Something didn't add up. The Marcus she knew would never, ever turn on her like this. There was no way he would accuse her of something so heinous, not without some kind of manipulation. She wasn't naive enough to think Harris hadn't found a way to twist things in his favor. But this was a new LOW, as the report continued. Sophia's hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms. The sickening feeling in her gut deepened. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was part of a bigger plan. The phone in her hand buzzed. A message from Agent Michael Harris, her supervisor. She opened it with trembling hands. "Sophia, we need to talk. I've just gotten some disturbing information. Marcus, he's been compromised. Harris has something on him. I don't know the details yet, but he's not acting like himself. Be careful. This is bigger than we thought." Sophia's mind went numb. Compromised. Blackmailed. The pieces began to fall into place, each one more damning than the last. Harris had to have found a way to get to Marcus. He must have gotten his hands on something, some dirty secret from Marcus's past, and used it to control him. Marcus was a good cop, but everyone had a weakness, and Harris knew exactly where to strike. That Sophia's legs buckled beneath her, and she sank onto the couch, her heart pounding in her chest. She had trusted Marcus, trusted him with her life, with her cover, and now he was a tool in Harris's twisted game. She had believed they were fighting on the same side. But Marcus wasn't just a victim here. He was a pawn in a much larger scheme, a pawn who had now become part of the machinery that was working against her. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Michael. "You need to get to Marcus. He's not safe. He might be the key to everything. But be careful. Harris is pulling strings, and they go deeper than we thought. They've already made their move." Sophia's hands shook as she stared at the screen. Every instinct told her to rush to Marcus, to confront him, to demand the truth. But she knew she couldn't just storm in without a plan. Harris was playing chess, and she was trapped in a game where every move was carefully calculated. She was out of time. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. The betrayal ran deeper than the blackmail. Marcus had not only turned his back on her, he had become a cog in the system that was trying to destroy her. Sophia was no longer just fighting for her job. She was fighting for her life. She couldn't let Harris win. Not now. Not after everything. Sophia's life was unraveling faster than she could control. Every lead she followed seemed to pull her deeper into the nightmare Harris had created. But she wasn't about to let him destroy her, not without a fight. She had a plan. She had to. The pieces were falling into place, and Harris's web of lies and manipulation was beginning to show cracks. She thought she was safe, driving back to her apartment after a tense meeting with Michael Harris, her supervisor. The city's glow blurred outside the window, the streetlights flickering as she made her way through the quiet backroads. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Her instincts, honed over years of service, screamed that danger was lurking. As she turned down a narrow alley, the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. The silence around her was oppressive, the air thick with tension. The headlights of her car sliced through the darkness, illuminating the walls of the alley for a split second. And then, without warning, it happened. A sudden crash against the side of her car made her heart leap into her throat. Her pulse surged as the car jerked to a halt. Before she could even process what was happening, two men appeared from the shadows, moving quickly toward her. They were masked, their movements coordinated and aggressive. The sickening thud of fists on metal echoed in the confined space. Sophia's hand instinctively reached for her gun, but it was too late. One of the attackers grabbed her by the arm, yanking her from the car. The force was enough to throw her off balance. The other swung a crowbar, the sharp metal glinting in the dim light that Sophia's heart raced. She had been trained for moments like this, prepared for violence, prepared for confrontation. But she hadn't anticipated being ambushed so suddenly. The first man swung his fist at her, but Sophia ducked, narrowly avoiding the blow. She pivoted on her heel, slamming an elbow into his gut. The impact knocked the wind out of him, but he recovered quickly, grabbing her arm in a vice-like grip. The second attacker, now standing behind her, raised the crowbar. Without thinking, Sophia kicked backward with all her strength, landing a solid blow to his knee. The man screamed in pain, crumpling to the ground. But there was no time to savor the small victory. Sophia twisted her body, using the man holding her arm as leverage. With a swift, calculated move, she broke free from his grip and spun around. The next few seconds felt like they were in slow motion. She saw the crowbar coming toward her head, but she ducked low, sweeping his legs out from under him. He crashed to the ground with a grunt. Sophia didn't hesitate. She reached into her jacket, drawing her gun, and pointed it directly at the remaining attacker. He froze, fear flashing in his eyes as he stumbled backward. Sophia's breath was heavy, but her hand never wavered. "Who sent you?" she demanded, her voice steady, cold. The man didn't answer. Instead, he turned and ran, disappearing into the darkness of the alley. Sophia's hands were still shaking as she lowered her gun, scanning the alley to make sure there were no more surprises lurking in the shadows. The adrenaline surged through her, her heart pounding in her chest. She was alive. She had won again. But the victory felt hollow. She knew Harris had orchestrated this attack. He had sent these men to intimidate her, to break her spirit. But Sophia wasn't broken. She called Michael Harris immediately, her voice clipped with urgency. "It's happening. He's escalating. I was ambushed in the alley. I fought them off, but he's not done. Stay where you are." Michael's voice was tight with concern. "We'll send backup, but you need to stay low. Harris is manipulating this. You're the villain now, Sophia. He's turning the media against you." Sophia's stomach twisted. The last thing she needed was to be painted as the aggressor, especially after everything she had been through. But it was happening. The next day, the headlines screamed her name. FBI agent attacks officers in alleyway brawl. And the news outlets fueled the flames, portraying her as the rogue agent who had lost control. The lies were everywhere. Harris's influence was reaching deep into the public's consciousness. And as much as Sophia wanted to fight back, she knew that Harris's game wasn't over. He had won the first round, manipulating the narrative, twisting the truth. And the worst part, people were starting to believe him. Sophia clenched her fists, her resolve hardening. She had no choice now but to expose Harris. Every lie, every deceit. The battle had just begun, and she wasn't backing down. Sophia's phone buzzed at a late hour, the vibration sending a jolt through her tired body. She had barely slept the past few days, each night filled with the ever-growing weight of Harris's manipulation. But the phone call that came through changed everything. "Sophia?" A voice hissed through the receiver. It was her sister, Lena. The sound of fear in her voice cut through the static, and Sophia's heart instantly skipped a beat. "They've got us." Sophia's blood ran cold. "Who?" "Lena, what are you talking about? Where are you?" Lena's voice was shaky, barely above a whisper. "They're here, Sophia. 2 men, masked. They came in and took us, me, Jaden, Malik. They're holding us at an old warehouse on the edge of the city. They said if you don't turn yourself in, they'll hurt us." Sophia's world tilted. Every muscle in her body tensed, her mind racing as adrenaline surged through her veins. This was it. Harris had escalated from threats to action. He had gone after the people she loved most. "Sophia, Please. Lena's voice cracked, the desperation in her words making Sophia's heart ache. Please don't make them hurt the boys. I can't. I'll fix this. Sophia's voice was a low growl, the edge of determination sharpening in her words. Stay calm. Don't do anything. I'll get you out. The line went dead. Sophia's hands trembled as she hung up the phone. Panic clawed at her chest, but she forced herself to stay focused. Harris had crossed a line now. She was no longer just a target in his game. He had gone after her family. He had taken them hostage to manipulate her. Sophia immediately texted Agent Michael Harris, her supervisor. The message was short, urgent. Harris has my sister and nephews. He wants me to surrender. I need backup now. Within minutes, a reply came back. Don't act recklessly. We're pulling together a team, but you have to stay calm. Stay where you are. Don't make any moves until we can get eyes on the warehouse. Sophia didn't wait. The thought of Lena and the boys in Harris's hands made her sick to her stomach. But there was no time for hesitation. She grabbed her gun, checked the chamber, and stepped out of her apartment. The cold night air bit at her as she sprinted to her car, mind racing with thoughts of what Harris might do next. The drive felt endless. Every turn, every streetlight, every shadow seemed like another obstacle standing between her and her family. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest. She had no choice. She had to turn herself in, had to sacrifice her own freedom for their safety. Harris knew it, and she had to play into his hands, at least for now. When she reached the warehouse, she didn't see any signs of movement at first, but the feeling in her gut told her something was wrong. She stepped out of the car, her steps slow but deliberate. The darkness of the night seemed to swallow the surrounding buildings. The warehouse loomed ahead, dark and foreboding, and Sophia could feel her pulse pounding in her neck as she approached. Just as she reached the door, her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Lena at IT, was a text message from Harris. You've made the right choice, Agent Taylor. Surrender now, or the consequences will be far worse than you think. Your sister and nephews are safe for now. Sophia's heart twisted in her chest. The anger surged again, hotter and fiercer than before, but she couldn't let her rage control her. She stepped inside the warehouse, trying to steady her breath, trying to remember that every move she made now had to be calculated. The lights flickered on, and there, in the center of the room, were her sister and nephews, bound to chairs. The sight of them was almost too much to bear, but it was the man standing behind them that made her freeze in her tracks. That IT was Harris, and in his hand was a small plastic bag, filled with what looked like drugs. You thought you could outsmart me, didn't you? Harris's voice rang out, mocking her. I've been watching you, Sophia, and now, I've planted what I need in your apartment. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. He had done it. He had planted the drugs in her apartment and would now accuse her of drug trafficking, falsifying evidence to make her the criminal in this whole mess. Before she could say anything, Harris's smirk grew wider. He nodded at the two thugs standing by the door. One of them shoved Lena forward. Let's make this clear, Harris said, his voice dangerously calm. You're going to confess, or they pay the price. Sophia's blood ran cold, but she refused to show weakness. She stepped forward, every muscle in her body tense, ready to make her next move. Harris was playing his game, but this wasn't over. I'll do whatever it takes to make sure they're safe, Sophia said through clenched teeth. But I won't be your pawn anymore. It was then that Sophia knew the true depth of Harris's cruelty. He had not just framed her. He had taken everything from her, her reputation, her family, and now her freedom. She had walked into this warehouse prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice, but she was done playing by his rules. The war was far from over, and she would make sure Harris paid the price. The courtroom was suffocating. The air was thick with tension as Sophia Taylor sat at the defendant's table, her hands clenched into fists beneath the table. Her once pristine FBI badge, now a symbol of everything she had fought for, sat heavy against her chest. She had gathered evidence, clear, undeniable evidence of her innocence. The dash cam footage, the testimony from witnesses who had seen her attacked in that alley. The truth all laid out for anyone to see. But none of it mattered. The courtroom was a stage for a play where the script had already been written. The judge, Judge Raymond Grayson, was a man with a reputation for quick rulings. A man who had his eyes set on protecting the system, not the truth. And as Sophia sat there, her heart pounding, she realized with a cold, sickening clarity that she was nothing more than a pawn in a game far larger than she could have imagined. Her lawyer, Carla Vance, was standing beside her, arguing fiercely, her voice strong, but it was clear she was fighting a losing battle. "Your Honor," Carla said, her voice unwavering, "we have dash cam footage, eyewitness testimony, and forensic evidence that clears Agent Taylor of all charges. Officer Harris's claims are not only false, but they're part of a calculated, malicious attempt to frame her." The judge didn't even look up. Instead, he was scribbling notes, his eyes fixed on the paperwork in front of him, the weight of the decision already hanging in the air like an iron curtain. Sophia's stomach twisted. She knew it was coming. She had felt it in every movement, every turn of the proceedings. The bias was obvious. The system, once something she believed in, had already made its decision. Harris, with his connections, his influence, and his lies, had already won. "The court has reviewed the evidence presented," Judge Grayson said, his voice flat and dismissive. "And while the defense has provided evidence of Agent Taylor's innocence, the prosecution has also provided testimony from multiple credible witnesses. Therefore, I find the defendant guilty of assaulting an officer and resisting arrest." Sophia's breath caught in her throat. Guilty. The words echoed in her mind like a death knell. All the sacrifices, all the work, all the blood and sweat. It meant nothing. Everything she had fought for was being ripped away, piece by piece. Carla stepped forward, her face pale, but still holding her ground. "Your Honor, this is a miscarriage of justice." The judge barely spared her a glance. "Enough, Ms. Vance. This trial is over." He slammed his gavel down with finality. Sophia's heart dropped to the pit of her stomach as the courtroom filled with murmurs. She felt a sharp sting in her eyes, the weight of the world pressing down on her chest. She had given everything, her career, her safety, her family, only to be torn apart by the very system she had sworn to protect. But then she saw Lena, sitting in the front row, her eyes red and swollen from tears. Jaden and Malik, her young nephews, sat beside her, their faces full of confusion and fear. Lena caught her gaze, and for a fleeting moment, Sophia saw the love and pain reflected in her sister's eyes. Sophia fought back the tears, but it was useless. The dam inside her broke. The truth had been drowned out by corruption. Harris had won, and she was left with nothing but the wreckage of her once promising life. She was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. Her heart felt like it was being torn from her chest. She could hear the whispers, the judgment, the condemnation from the people who once admired her. She wasn't just losing her job. She was losing everything. Her world had crumbled in that moment, and yet, as she walked out of that courtroom, she still had one thing left, her resolve. She would not let this be the end. But as she stood there, her wrists shackled, her dreams slipping through her fingers, she realized that sometimes the cost of doing what's right is everything you have. And in that moment, Sophia Taylor knew she would never stop fighting for the truth, for her family, for herself. But tonight, she couldn't help but wonder, was it enough? The courtroom doors slammed shut behind Sophia, sealing the finality of the judge's verdict. The world outside seemed to swallow her whole, and for a brief moment, she was lost in the chaos of it all. Her name was now a symbol of something darker, the scapegoat for a system so corrupted it couldn't even see the truth anymore. People were protesting in the streets, but instead of a wave of support, it felt like an angry tide crashing against her. Her phone buzzed. Messages, calls from friends, from contacts, all trying to offer words of comfort, but none of them reached her. How could they? She was now nothing more than a broken agent, an example of what happens when the good guys lose. The protests, though, weren't just about her anymore. They were about the systemic rot that had been exposed, about the corruption of the police, the manipulation by Harris. But that wasn't what terrified her the most. It was what came next. In a swift, coordinated effort, Harris escaped custody. It happened so fast that even the highest security measures couldn't stop it. He was a ghost, vanishing into the wind, but not without leaving a trail of destruction behind him. White Dawn, the militia group with ties to Harris, had orchestrated his escape. They'd broken him out of the holding cell, moving with military precision, leaving law enforcement in their wake, scrambling to recover. And just like that, Harris was free. Sophia's stomach twisted into a tight knot. White Dawn was no joke. A group built on extremist ideals and a hatred that ran deeper than any she had seen before. Harris, with his deep connections, was now feeding off their resources, growing his influence like a virus, spreading through the dark corners of the city. It didn't take long for Sophia to realize that Harris wasn't just going to sit back and let the system catch up to him. He was playing the long game, rallying forces, making new allies who were just as dangerous as he was. His power, once limited to a badge, was now backed by weapons, by militias, by people who didn't care about the truth. As the world around her burned with chaos, Sophia was stuck in the middle, her own career and life on the line. The city she had once sworn to protect was unraveling, and she couldn't afford to wait around any longer. She had to find Harris, expose him for what he was, and clear her name. But every step she took seemed to lead to more questions than answers. Sophia stood outside the crumbling remains of her former life. Torn between the past she couldn't seem to escape and the future she was desperately fighting for. The world had written her off, but she knew she was far from done. She had to fight for her family, for her integrity, and for the truth. She couldn't let Harris win. But every move she made, every phone call she took, felt like it was being watched. White Dawn had infiltrated the system. Their network was vast, their reach far, and Harris was at the heart of it all, stirring the pot. The danger was now everywhere, even in the places she thought were safe. As her phone rang, Sophia glanced down, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the name. Agent Michael Harris. She picked up immediately. Sophia, you need to move fast. Harris is growing stronger. We've got intel that he's making alliances with some very dangerous people. I'm talking about national-level connections now. If we don't expose him soon, it'll be too late. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. This was getting worse, faster than she could process. Harris was more than just a rogue officer. He was a man with resources, power, and the drive to burn everything down to clear his name. The pieces were falling into place, but it was too late to stop him now. Or was it? What do we do? Sophia's voice was steady, but the tension was unbearable. She could feel the weight of everything. Her career, her reputation, and the looming threat to her family. Michael's voice was grim. We go after the people behind him. They're hiding in plain sight. We have to move fast and take them down one by one. But you need to be careful. Harris won't hesitate to destroy anyone who gets in his way. Sophia nodded. She knew this wasn't just about clearing her name anymore. This was war, and Harris had declared it first. She was ready, but the question remained, was it too late to stop him? The energy in the air was palpable, a mixture of anger and anticipation as the rally began to swell in size. The crowd was a sea of people, many waving flags and shouting slogans, but Sophia wasn't here for the noise or the protests. She was here for Harris, and this was going to be the moment she exposed him for the liar, the manipulator, the criminal he truly was. Sophia stood at the edge of the rally, her heart pounding in her chest as she watched Harris take the stage. He stood there, his smirk a clear indication of the control he thought he had over this entire situation. The microphone in his hand was like a weapon, his words slicing through the crowd like a sharp blade. He was painting himself as the hero, the victim, and the defender of the people, while in reality, he was the villain in this twisted play. Sophia's breath steadied as she stepped forward, her mind focused on the task at hand. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about justice, about exposing Harris for the monster he had become. This was about taking him down, once and for all. The crowd's energy shifted as Sophia made her way to the front. Harris didn't see her at first. He was too busy soaking in the applause, basking in the power he had cultivated. But when she stepped onto the stage, all eyes were on her. "Harris," she called out, her voice cutting through the noise like a knife. His head snapped to her, and for the briefest moment, his eyes flickered with recognition. "You think you can continue to lie and manipulate the people?" Sophia's words rang out, clear and strong. "You think you can keep hiding behind your badge, your lies, and your corrupted power?" The crowd quieted, and Harris's confident smile faltered as he stepped toward her. "What's this, Sophia? You're not content with the damage you've already done." Sophia's eyes didn't leave his. She was calm, but every word she spoke was laced with the fury of everything he had taken from her. "This is where your lies end." Without hesitation, she pulled out a tablet, holding it up for the crowd to see. The screen flashed with undeniable evidence. Harris's own words, his corruption, and his manipulations. She had gathered everything. The footage from the warehouse, the damning emails, the conversations he had with White Dawn, the militia group he was working with. The truth was finally on display for all to see. That Sophia's voice shook the air as she read from the screen. "This man has been framing innocent people, exploiting his position to cover his tracks, and causing destruction in the name of his own twisted agenda." The crowd began to murmur, disbelief spreading like wildfire. Harris's face twisted in anger, his mask slipping as he tried to regain control of the situation. He rushed toward her, but it was too late. The truth was already out. "No one is buying your lies anymore, Harris," Sophia continued, unwavering. "You're the one who needs to be held accountable for the crimes you've committed." For a moment, it seemed like the crowd might turn against Harris. But just as the tides began to shift, the unthinkable happened. Harris's supporters, hidden among the crowd, stepped forward. Armed men in tactical gear, his own militia, quickly surged onto the stage. They were there to silence her, to take control of the narrative. Harris's smug smile returned, but it was different now. He was cornered, desperate, but he had one last card to play to end the chaos that followed. Sophia was overpowered. The crowd's roar filled her ears as she struggled, but Harris's reach was too vast. Within moments, he had vanished again, his militia sweeping him away before anyone could stop him. Sophia's heart sank, but she wasn't broken. Not why ETS. The rally disbanded, chaos spreading throughout the streets. Sophia took a deep breath. She knew this battle wasn't over. Harris had escaped, but this time he had made a critical mistake. He had underestimated her resolve. Sophia stepped off the stage, her eyes locked on the horizon. She wasn't done. The war wasn't over. She had one final plan, one final chance to take him down. And this time, she wasn't going to play by his rules. She was going to make sure he faced the consequences of his actions. If there was one thing Harris hadn't accounted for, it was that Sophia Taylor was relentless. She had come too far, sacrificed too much to let him get away. Now as she walked away from the chaos, she whispered to herself, "This ends now." And she meant it. If you've been inspired by Sophia's strength, her resilience, and her fight for justice, then don't miss the next chapter in her battle. Subscribe now to follow her journey and witness firsthand how she continues to fight for what's right, no matter the cost. Justice is not a battle you fight once. It's a war you wage for as long as it takes. Stay tuned and join the fight. Together, we can make sure the truth always prevails.